The war, which lasted from 1914 to 1918, introduced a new scale of violence and destruction as nations wielded industrialized military power against one another. For soldiers on the front lines, the war was a nightmare of unprecedented scale, marked by brutal conditions and unrelenting horrors. The daily life of a soldier was characterized by constant danger, physical and psychological suffering, and a relentless struggle for survival. These experiences underscore the profound human cost of the war, as men faced not only the threat of death but also the erosion of their humanity amid the desolate battlefields. The trenches, which stretched across Europe from the English Channel to the Alps, became the defining feature of the Western Front. Dug to shield soldiers from enemy fire, these muddy ditches quickly devolved into living hells. Trench warfare trapped men in a grim cycle of monotony and terror, where they faced the relentless threat of artillery bombardments, sniper fire, and surprise gas attacks. The trenches were often waterlogged, transforming into muddy pits where soldiers had to stand for days, sometimes even weeks, unable to rest or move freely. In these conditions, basic hygiene was nearly impossible to maintain. Soldiers faced infestations of lice, which bred in the seams of their uniforms and caused intense itching. Rats, some as large as cats, thrived on the remains of the fallen, spreading disease and adding to the soldiers' misery. The lack of sanitation led to outbreaks of trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to wet, unsanitary conditions, resulting in swollen, numb feet that could turn gangrenous if left untreated. Sleep was a rare luxury, and soldiers would often catch brief moments of rest amid the noise and chaos of artillery bombardments. The ceaseless rumble of the guns day and night created an inescapable sense of dread, as no one knew when the next shell might explode nearby. The omnipresence of death in the trenches was a psychological burden that wore down even the most resilient soldiers. The mental strain of trench warfare was immense. Soldiers lived under constant threat, not only from the enemy but from the very environment they occupied. The perils of no man's land, the barren expanse of land between opposing trenches, meant that any attempt to advance could lead to instant death, as exhibited symptoms like tremors, nightmares, and uncontrollable fear. The psychological toll extended beyond shell shock, as many soldiers experienced what was described as war neurosis. This condition manifested as debilitating anxiety, hallucinations, or even complete emotional numbness. The continuous stress and trauma led to a breakdown of morale as men struggled to cope with the horrors surrounding them. The haunting memories of friends killed in action, the sight of mangled bodies, and the knowledge that death could come at any moment left many veterans with lifelong emotional scars. The horror of gas warfare. World War I saw the introduction of chemical warfare, which added a new dimension to the terror experienced on the battlefield. Poison gas, such as chlorine and mustard gas, was deployed to incapacitate, blind, and kill soldiers. The first large-scale use of chemical weapons occurred in 1915, and from that point forward, the threat of a gas attack loomed constantly over the trenches. Gas masks provided some protection, but they were often cumbersome and uncomfortable, hindering the ability to breathe, see, or communicate effectively. When the gas alarm sounded, soldiers scrambled to put on their masks, knowing that even a momentary delay could mean severe injury or death. Those exposed to gas without sufficient protection suffered agonizing symptoms: choking, blistering skin, and blindness. The effects could be long-lasting, with some victims suffering respiratory problems or blindness for the remainder of their lives. Daily life, food, rest, and the weight. The daily grind of trench life extended beyond combat as soldiers contended with poor rations, sleep deprivation, and the bleakness of their surroundings. Food was often in short supply and of poor quality. Hard biscuits, canned meat, and watery stews were the norm, lacking in both nutrition and taste. Water supplies were also compromised, sometimes tainted by corpses or chemicals. The soldiers had to endure hunger and thirst, further weakening their physical condition. The endless waiting was another tormenting aspect of trench life. There were long periods of inactivity during which soldiers anticipated the next bombardment or attack. This prolonged inactivity bred a unique kind of psychological torment, The anxiety and tension of waiting for the inevitable were at times as exhausting as the combat itself. Time spent in the trenches became an unbearable monotony, punctuated by brief moments of sheer terror. The medical nightmare treating the wounded. Medical facilities near the front lines were rudimentary, and the overwhelming number of casualties often exceeded the capacity of field hospitals. Many soldiers faced horrific injuries from shrapnel, bullets, and explosions. Conditions in medical stations were often unsanitary, leading to infections and complications even when soldiers survived their initial wounds. The sheer volume of casualties meant that medical personnel had to make grim decisions about whom to prioritize, leaving many soldiers to die without proper care. Amputations became a common procedure, as shattered limbs could not be saved with the limited medical technology available. Those who survived such operations faced a lifetime of disability and hardship. Additionally, the risk of infection from unsanitary conditions in the trenches and field hospitals meant that even minor wounds could become life-threatening. The cost of war, a generation scarred. The horrors of daily life for soldiers in World War I left an indelible mark on the men who fought. For many, the war did not end with the signing of the armistice. It continued in the form of physical disabilities, psychological trauma, and the loss of friends and comrades. The war had shattered their bodies and minds, eroded their sense of normalcy, and left them struggling to reintegrate into civilian life. The experience of soldiers in World War I reveals the devastating human cost of industrialized warfare. It was not just the loss of life, but the quality of life that was sacrificed. The conditions in which soldiers lived and fought were a testament to the brutality of the conflict, highlighting how the pursuit of military objectives often came at an inhumane price. The stories of those who endured the trenches, faced the horrors of gas warfare, and struggled to survive amidst death and despair serve as a stark reminder of the profound suffering wrought by war.